Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and you're listening to The Business of Content, a podcast about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. In this week's episode, we discuss a B2B media company that reached profitability while covering a $7.5 trillion industry. John Yedinak didn't have a traditional journalism background when he started his media company. He was working in the mortgage industry when he read an interview with TechCrunch founder Michael Arrington. The interview inspired him to launch his own blog on the reverse mortgage industry, and as the blog's audience grew, he began to realize that there was a massive market out there for niche B2B publications. In 2012, he officially launched the Aging Media Network, a constellation of sites that cover the businesses that service the aging population, from hospice care to senior housing. I recently sat down with Yedinak to talk about how his team built the audience for the publications, how they monetize the sites, and why they focus on advertising instead of paid subscriptions. Let's jump right into it. Hey, John, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you run something called the Aging Media Network. Can you give us kind of a quick overview of what that is?
Yeah, so Aging Media, we are the largest B2B publisher focusing on the $7.5 trillion aging services industry. So we are the largest publisher in five different verticals. So senior housing, home healthcare, skilled nursing. We recently just got into hospice. And then we have one kind of site that's not our main focus anymore, but it's what got us started. It's actually in the reverse mortgage industry. So what we've really done is we've created this really unique and frankly influential media company that focuses on the professionals that serve this massive aging service industry. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
So to be clear, this is a B2B media company. So like the people who are reading it are the businesses who work for the businesses that serve the aging population.
Absolutely. So we're hardcore B2B. Seniors do read us from time to time, but it's not, our main audience. We're focusing on everybody from, healthcare providers to healthcare REITs to lenders, financing people, investment bankers, pretty much anybody that services the businesses that serve seniors.
Uh-huh. And like, is it the executives within those companies, or would like a nurse that visits a senior every day, would they read it, or is it more like the people who hire those nurses, or like who are the people who primarily make up the readership?
Yeah, it's a great question. So typically we try and focus on VP and above, so executive level. But depending on the vertical, a lot of times people like nurses and stuff actually have a lot of sway. And, whether or not they have a lot of sway, they're a very important part of the industry. So, for example, on like our skilled nursing or maybe hospice, there might be a little bit more nursing type people. Typically, it's somebody that's like a director of nursing who might oversee a bunch of nurses and things like that. But yeah, we definitely target VP and above. I like to say we're kind of like the Bloomberg of our respective B2B verticals.
So this company, correct me if I'm wrong, it launched in 2012. What were you doing prior to launching it? Like I saw that you mentioned that you really had no journalism experience leading up to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely no journalism experience. So the company, while Aging Media started about 7 years ago, the company really got its start 12 years ago. So I was a college dropout. I left school. I was working for the Dallas Mavericks and honestly wasn't really enjoying school. So I left and I started working in mortgage banking. I decided this was actually 12 years ago. Yes, it was 12 years ago to around this time. I was reading a lot of blogs, specifically one called TechCrunch. And I read an interview with a guy named Michael Arrington who founded it. And he started to talk about the business model behind blogs in general. And as a journalist, you probably remember this, but like the 150 by 150 squares, like on the right-hand side. I don't know.
I remember those.
You remember those?
On TechCrunch. Yeah. Federated Media, I think, sold those.
Exactly. And it was like, that was kind of like the in vogue thing. And I'll never forget it. I was reading an interview with him and he said he was making $5,000 a month from each one of those squares. And at this point, there was probably like 20 of them. And I was like, I was a kid out of college, making maybe 28, 30 grand a year. I was like, whoa, if I launch a blog and I can make, just sell one of those ads, I'd be living. So I was reading a lot of like trade publications in the mortgage industry, like National Mortgage News, American Banker, and the reverse mortgage industry was starting to kind of take off because of the aging baby boomers. And so, being a young kind of naive person, It was actually the night of after Thanksgiving. I remember going home and like being like, I'm going to launch a WordPress blog. And
So just to back up, so the trade publications, one thing I've noticed is their websites look like they're 20 years out of date. Has that been your experience? Because you obviously run a trade website yourself. So like, why is that true, and why is that a lot of trade publications just have god awful ugly websites?
I think because they're still run by a lot of old school companies that don't understand how to launch a good digital publication, to be honest. I mean, to be totally fair, we were probably them 2 years ago because we didn't really have tons of money and we didn't really know what we were doing. But, it's one of those where
But is it because but why hasn't market forces forced them to catch up with the rest of the media industry? Is it because they're somewhat insulated in terms of competition?
Well, two things. I think one, I think they're a little bit insulated, but at the end of the day in B2B, how your website looks isn't as important as the value of your content. So it's one of those where you can have an ugly website, but have the most killer, unique, hard to find content with the best, insights and analysis. And at the end of the day, especially if people are paying for that, they don't really care how it looks. They're reading it to help themselves be better at their job or to help them invest better, things like that. So while I'd like to consider ourselves a more forward thinking B2B company in terms of design, I don't think it's a requirement. But I do think that as there's these new wave, digitally focused B2B companies coming to market, it's going to make them up their game. But, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. I mean, most of the traditional B2B companies are still trying to figure things out. They're more print focused, and it's just like, young upstarts like us come and kind of clean their can. And yeah, I don't know. Design's an important part of that, in my opinion.
So you were reading these mortgage, these mortgage secure. I think that you said they were mortgage security publications. You saw this interview with Michael Arrington. What happened after that?
I launched Reverse Mortgage Daily and just essentially started sharing articles that I found that I thought would be interesting to the industry. Just kind of more aggregating, to be totally honest. But I'd say after, a couple of years, I started to try and write, and, some articles a lot better than others, but did that for about 5 years, and then eventually started to make enough money from selling ads. I mean, I'll never forget the first ad I sold. I was actually moving offices at our mortgage company, and I got a call from somebody who was like, "Hey, we love what you're doing. Like, do you accept advertising?" And I was like, "Sure." So, I figured out how to launch an ad server, serve ads, figured out what a media kit was, all this different kind of stuff, and, launched that. And, one thing after another, started to make a few bucks, was able to quit my job, do it full time. And then I hired our first employee, whose name is Liz Ecker. She's still with me today, and she is our director of content. But what the company really started, Aging Media, at its core, was 7 years ago. My brother, seeing what I had done in the reverse mortgage space, launched a website called Senior Housing News. So at that point, 7 years ago, I had, I think, 2 people maybe. And we merged the companies together to form Aging Media. And we took Senior Housing News, which was a little more consumer facing at the time, spun it hardcore B2B, and it just kind of took off. So once we did that, we started to grow like what I would call a relatively real business. I think we had 3 or 4 people. And then we started to look for other verticals that were interesting to the people in senior housing. So we launched Home Healthcare News. We kind of half-assed it at the beginning, to be honest. We didn't really give it the resources we needed. But once we started to put like a full-time person on it, it started to gain a lot of traction, and is now actually our largest site that we have. So that was, at that point, we had 3 websites. And what we've done is each time we've launched a website or into a new vertical, it's worked. But really, I would say after Home Healthcare News became successful, we started to realize the value in building a vertical media company focused around aging, because it is such a massive company. But the nice thing is when we're launching into these, different verticals, they're actually very complementary to all of our other businesses. So we're building this like unique kind of knowledge set of information around the post-acute healthcare space, which, is just an amazing resource for people who are in healthcare. And frankly, it's been really good for us where now, just from a business standpoint, there's a lot of people that are in these all of these different industries. So rather than having to, go work with a bunch of different publications, they come to Aging Media, and we can service their needs in all these different verticals with like one point of contact and things like that. So it's been, we kind of fell into it and we got a little lucky, but, I'd say about 3 years ago, we kind of really figured out, oh, wow, we're onto something. And we've just been kind of doubling down since then.
So how did you gain an audience? Like, where were these people, these initial people coming to your blog, and then later these more kind of professionalized news sites? Like, how, like, tell me about, like, in terms of like that growth curve, and like where you saw people starting to come from and become loyal readers.
Yeah, typically the way we built our audience is just through word of mouth. And when I say word of mouth, it's typically people sharing emails and, sharing links and things like that. We've never spent any money on, acquisition in terms of, buying traffic or anything like that. It's always been organic. Typically what we find is once we get 1,000 people to sign up for an email list, we can start to monetize it. So I know to the general public, that doesn't sound like a lot, but what I always say, it's about the quality of the audience, not the quantity, and so it's one of those where once we are able to get 1,000 people in a vertical that's actually very big, you kind of start to see some network effects, and you start to see that grow a little bit faster, where we really just do it organically. I mean, everything from Google, Google News, which we don't get tons of traffic from, but, Google News, just regular Google searches. But people typically find out about us because we're creating something that's new and unique and provides insights that they're not getting, that they end up sharing with their colleagues. So it's been a lot of fun. But I mean, every time we launch into a new vertical, we do it, organically. But now the one advantage we have now is, like, we're getting into hospice right now. We've kind of soft launched. We haven't really told too many people about it, but because a lot of people in our other industries also provide hospice services, we're just going to announce it to our different verticals, and then boom, all of a sudden we have a business basically overnight. And so it's one of those where each vertical we go into, we start to go deeper and deeper and deeper into those specific industries, and it's just kind of steamrolls from there.
How reliant are you on, like, social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter? I would guess not very much.
No, I don't want to say not at all, but so little of our traffic, I'd guess last time I looked was less than 5% of our traffic comes from, social media in general. Depending on the vertical, like, for example, the more nursing focused the industry is, where it's more healthcare focused, we actually do have some success with Facebook, where a lot of nurses and different people share stuff with their colleagues on Facebook, which we never guessed. But in terms of, like, our overall strategy, do we share it on Facebook? Do we have somebody that does that? Absolutely. Now, is it a main driver? No. Email continues to be the main driver of our business, and I don't see that changing ever, really.
So you're trying to convert people into newsletter subscribers, and then your newsletters, talk me about, like, what your newsletter strategy is. Like, are you mainly just kind of rounding up links to articles and sending people clicking to the website? Like, how do you approach the email stuff?
Yeah, right now our email strategy is pretty simple. We put our articles in there. It's more text based now. It used to be a little bit more visual, but what we found is people, typically in the B2B world, in terms of metrics and stuff, text based email works the best. So we're slowly getting to a point where we're giving our editors more of an editorial voice in each email, which I think is kind of a trend just in, publishing in general. But it's pretty simple, man. I mean, we have some text email or text ads in the emails along with a couple banners. But it's one of those, it's, we typically find the simpler the better in B2B. It doesn't need to be super fancy, but it needs to be effective. And so we've had a lot of success with email. I always laugh when I see or read all these publishers about, hedging or trying to arbitrage traffic from social media and different stuff like that. I'm like, guys, it's just all about getting that email and serving your customer. It's like, it's not that complicated.
And do you have, like, the complete articles inside the email, or are you linking them to the website?
Just linking them to the website. So that way we can monetize both audiences, because we do sell, advertising in our emails, and then we also sell advertising on our websites as well.
What are you doing with podcasts?
Podcasts are a fun experiment right now. So we launched what we call Disrupt on our home healthcare news website about a year ago, and we've had a lot of success with it. And it was kind of our, hey, let's just try this and see what it works. And to be honest, we're really lucky in the home healthcare space to have a lot of great sponsors and partners that are willing to kind of help us fund projects like this that they can get behind. So, I reached out to one of our first advertiser and biggest advertiser on home health. And I was like, hey, we want to launch a podcast. Would you help us, like, just get it off the ground? And they're like, let's do it. So we launched that. And then after success, we were like, hey, this is a lot of fun. And what we found with podcasts in general, in terms of, like, B2B, and I think just media in general, is that it helps feed the beast. And when I say the beast, it's the editorial beast that you need to keep kind of providing information to. And so podcasts have been a great way for our team to tell stories in a new creative way, but also giving us stuff that we can put on the website that's really good. And so it's one of those where we serve it in a podcast format, and then we also do something that's kind of like a summary that we post on our website not a full transcript, but just kind of a highlights thing that helps tease people to get them to listen to the whole thing. And it's been really successful. So it's one of those where when we did it, we actually kind of ripped off the Digiday model of how they do it. And it's been really successful for us.
So are you doing like Q&As with executives and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely C-level type people in each respective vertical. And, it's been great. I mean, when we launched our skilled nursing one, which I know to most people that will probably read this doesn't sound too sexy, we've had a lot of engagement there. There's a lot of executives that take trains to work and different things like that, or, to drive into work in their car and they listen to the podcast. It's kind of crazy to me, but, we've been really happy with the results so far. Is it a huge business for us? Not really, but I'd say probably across our verticals, I don't want to guess at this point, but is it significant enough to cover the production costs? Absolutely. And we make a few.
Well, I've heard that like a lot of, early on, a lot of businesses will sell it as like an add-on thing. So they're selling an ad product and they'll say, hey, we'll throw in podcasts as well, or something like that. Like that's how they're kind of easing people into it.
Yeah, definitely. And I wouldn't say we throw it on as like we definitely do sell it specifically, but it's one of those where for us, again, we don't sell like, the mass reach that a lot of other people do. We really sell the quality of our audience. And so it's one of those where, say, I'd guess on average, our annual contract for like a podcast sponsorship is anywhere from like 30 to 45 grand. So it's not huge, but it's not insignificant. So it's one of those where it's never going to be the main part of our business, but it's definitely going to be a part of our business. And at the end of the day, it helps to feed Editorial, which is what we do every single day.
So tell me about the Editorial, like what kind of journalism you're doing. Like, is it just the facts, ma'am, kind of straight news reporting? Are you doing like features and like long analysis pieces? Like what's the kind of main thrust of what your readers find valuable?
Yeah, so typically it's kind of all the above. What we're really starting to move towards is what we're calling AMNAs, which, I know sounds kind of tacky, Aging Media Network A articles, but we try and provide unique content, insights, and analysis that people can't find anywhere else. So while we do cover these, what a lot of people call unsexy industries, we do have competition, but it's one of those where our editorial staff is so much larger than our competitors that we're able to go deeper into, doing these deep dives, these longer features that might be, take a couple days, or you might talk to 5 or 6 people. We allow our team to do that. And it's one of those where you kind of have to balance, the quick hits with the long features. And so it's one of those, typically on each site, we're posting maybe 2 to 3 articles a day. So it's not a huge amount of content, but what we really try and focus on is creating stuff that people can't find elsewhere. And that's really what's driven our business going forward.
That reminds me of The Information. I don't know if you subscribe to that, but they really don't, they don't produce that much content, but it's like, they also don't do commodity news. Like everything they have to publish has to be, almost 100% original.
Exactly. And I am a subscriber to The Information and I like it. It's one of those where I think they're in a unique position. And it's something that we've looked at kind of trying to do, but I think everybody finds, like, depending on the space you're in, like we like to borrow from people that we think are doing a really cool job and kind of tailor it for our own industry verticals. And so, I wish I could say we had all these great original ideas, but a lot of times we look at like what other people are doing that we have a lot of respect for and really kind of, customize some ideas that they might be doing and, apply it to our verticals.
I meant to ask how many, you mentioned you had a larger editorial staff than made most trade publications. How large is your editorial staff?
So for our kind of sweet spot right now from an editorial team is we have 3 full-time people that are working on one individual vertical. So we try and keep it simple. Each of our verticals, we kind of look at from an editorial perspective as like having these small teams where we used to be set up differently, or it was like we had an editorial bullpen and it was kind of a shared resource, for a reporter bullpen that was a shared resource for editors. And what we found is that people were starting to cover more than one vertical and it was getting kind of confusing. So what we've really done over the past year is to really create these small focused teams that allow those teams to go deeper on respective verticals and really just become experts at that one respective vertical rather than kind of being a generalist across the board. And so that's been really successful for us. And I know to most people, 3 people doesn't probably sound huge, but when you're covering these industries, it's like most of our competitors have like one person that covers just like essentially rewrites press releases. So, you could take most of our competitors, combine them, and I think our editorial teams would still be larger.
And is everybody at like one centralized location?
Everybody but one person right now, who's Liz Ecker, who was our first employee. So she they got married and is now in San Diego, and I can't do anything to get her back to Chicago. But
so you guys are based in Chicago?
Yeah, so based in Chicago. Based in Chicago. Everybody else is here.
Walk me through your business model. It seems like it's largely advertising focused. Like, are you doing native ads versus display ads? Are you doing programmatic versus direct sales? Like, where are you seeing the main thrust of where you're generating money?
Yeah, so we don't do anything programmatic. It's all direct sales. In terms of revenue, we do it all. So we do everything from, I'd say, probably about 40% of our business is display advertising, which we all sell in-house. And then from there on out, it's kind of spread across a bunch of different things. And I would say that's branded content and lead gen, which has become a really, really big part of our business, which we're really excited about. So we have a branded content team that does that. And then we also sell paid research that we sell back to the industries. So it's something that we've kind of, I don't want to say beta test, but we have one person that focuses on that just in senior housing news. And I think we sold $190,000 worth of research last year. So it's one of those where we think we've kind of found a model that we'd like to replicate in the other verticals. But outside of that, we also do events and webinars and things like that. So our events business continues to grow. I think we're kind of finding our sweet spot in that area where, there are a lot of events in our industries. And so we've really tried to find a way to do something cool. My big saying to all my team is B2B doesn't have to be boring. B2B can be sexy. And so our event strategy going forward is putting on cool events that we would actually want to attend that, doesn't just have, sponsors on panels for just because they paid. And so trying to find a really good model for events, I think for us going forward is going to be a big part of our business because just from a business model perspective, events are great because you get paid up front. So it helps from a cash flow perspective, but it's just, we continue to get a little bit more excited about events, which is crazy because a year ago, I don't think I would have said that.
So are they like conferences or just like one day, like networking things where you might have like a single speaker?
So like all day events. So that could have, 8 different speakers at a, cool theater here in Chicago on Michigan Avenue, or they could be half a day events that are more executive focused, almost kind of like morning breakfast type things with 3 panels. So we have different formats for different verticals because, each vertical is a little bit different. And so it's one of those you really need to customize each of your offerings to that vertical to make sure it's successful.
And then on the research side, are those like custom research reports where like a single company will approach you and say, we want to know about XYZ, and then you go out and find XYZ? Or is it something like where it's a little bit more general and like a lot of different places subscribe to these reports? Like, how do you structure it?
Yeah, so we do the stuff where people come to us and say, hey, we'd like you to do a deep dive on X subject. We're going to use it for our own purposes, or we want to offer it as like a lead gen asset. But when I say research, it's really more stuff that we think is interesting that we do deep dives on. So it'll be these like, really sexy looking reports that are, 5,000 words on a specific topic. Typically they're more trend-based stuff. So it's like stuff that's coming that like the leaders want to know and kind of see these to help them spot these trends that are coming that, honestly, a 700-word article doesn't really do it justice. And so we've had a lot of success with that, just coming out with these reports. And, the first time we launched one, I'll never forget, it was back on, we used Gumroad. We put up the page, we hoped people would buy it, and we ended up selling like 30 grand of it. And we were like, holy shit, maybe we're on something. So it's been an interesting ride in the research world, but it feels, I will say, there's nothing better than producing a report and having people pay money for it. It's a really great feeling.
Yeah, I'm almost surprised that you don't even have more subscription like products, in the sense of like, it seems like niche would do really well with paid subscriptions where everything would be behind a paywall. Like, what made you decide to do a more kind of advertising focus versus an entirely subscription based product?
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. And, subscription is something that's coming down the pipe for us. So we're in the process of kind of making that transition. But in terms of when we got into the business, I would say a couple different reasons. One, there was, depending on the vertical, some people doing it that way. And so I think us coming in with a free model that was published every single day gave us a huge competitive advantage to kind of come in and clean their clock a little bit. So that that was part of the reason, but I would also just say we didn't really know what we were doing. I mean, we kind of had an idea, but if you would ask me how would we launch a paywall product 5 years ago, I would have been like, I have no idea. I'm just trying to figure out how to run an ad server, kind of stuff. It's like, we had other problems that we had to figure out, and frankly, we had to make money in order to survive. So now we're at a different point, from a strategic standpoint. We see the value of our content and we know how hard it is to create. And we think there's a part of our audience that consumes so much that would be more than happy to pay for it as long as we're giving them enough value. And so it's one of those, we continue to look at that. Like you said, the information, I think Digiday has a good membership model. I think people like Skift have a good one. And, there's a lot of people doing different things out there. And I think our model will kind of be a hybrid of all those ones I just named.
What kind of audience scale do you need to achieve to make this business model work? It seems like you guys can operate at like a fraction of the audience as a lot of these general news publishers.
Yeah. I mean, typically we can start to monetize our audience when we have an email list of 1,000 people.
Yeah. That's like tiny compared to something like what the BuzzFeeds of the world have to deal with.
Totally. But I mean, it's one of those where, I think our audience is actually more valuable in my opinion. I would rather have a really killer audience of 1,000 executives than 10,000 really average people. We've learned that like size in B2B doesn't really scale. Size in B2B doesn't really help you sell. What helps you sell is the influence of your audience. And so it's one of those, the more you start to focus on that and the quality of your audience over the quantity, everything else kind of falls into place. And so it's one of those, we don't even really get into the size of your email list discussion. I don't really think it's like super valuable from a sales perspective. And if that's what they want because they're a media ad planner right out of college, like we might not be the best fit, but typically what happens is they might buy somewhere else and then their boss is like, hey, why aren't we here? And they'll say, well, their email list isn't as big. And the boss will be like, I don't care. So it's just, it's kind of one of those, we focus on quality over quantity.
So like one of the things that obviously that is making a lot of general news publications struggle is that like, rather than me paying the premium of reaching the New York Times audience, I can just pay Facebook to reach their audience, and not just reach their audience, but, reach very specific subsections of their audiences that have specific interests. Like, why do you think people are more willing to buy ads on like niche publications like yours when I could theoretically buy ads on like LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter that can target those niche audiences?
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. But, what you just said is theoretically you probably could do that. But, how many executives that run, $1 billion corporation are really on Facebook every day looking for news and information on their respective vertical? I would question that happens a lot. But, it's a fair point, and I challenge someone to try and do it. But it's one of those where we found that typically the deeper that you go, the more valuable you are to your audience. And frankly, advertisers and business people want to be where their peers are, and frankly, their competitors are. And so it's one of those, that's where I think niche publications are only going to grow in the future, because the internet actually allows you to really target specific subsets of people. And there's a better mousetrap than Facebook, in my opinion, and it's email. And so the more you focus on acquiring those customers over email and making them a daily part, like making your publication a daily habit for them, the more successful you're going to be. And, I don't want to oversimplify and say that's easy, but it's one of those things, it can be done. And it's just done off of something so simple like email.
How do you interact with your audience? Like, is there any kind of back and forth conversations going outside of events, or is it mainly just a one-way broadcasting?
No, I mean, there's definitely conversation there. We did have comments on one of our sites, and it was a main part of like kind of the adoption, but it kind of got out of control. So we've pulled that back a little bit, and we're looking at ways to redeploy comments to kind of have more of that conversation. But, one of the interesting things I think is that, our reporters and editors have a lot of conversation with our audience on just a daily basis. It's like, if you hit reply on any of our emails that go out, it literally goes to the owners of the company. So it's one of those, we hear a lot from our audience, some stuff better than others, but it's one of those, the more dialogue you have with your audience, I think the better it is. But it's definitely one of those that can get kind of overwhelming, and you need to make sure you're having the right conversations versus just, having all the conversations.
So you haven't launched like a Facebook group or a Slack channel or something that like members can get into or anything like that.
No, I mean, God, man, I don't think anyone in our industry probably uses Slack, to be totally honest. But we've looked at it, and now, I mean, our mousetrap works right now, and we're always looking at other ideas. But it's at the end of the day, I think the average executive that's not in the tech sector is still using email to communicate almost. I don't want to say primarily, but it probably is. So yeah, we just kind of really focus on email.
Not every publisher can be a super niche publisher like you. Like we actually need general news. Like, do you feel like there are any takeaways or learnings that you have that can be expanded beyond niche? Like when you read about the trials and tribulations of these more general news publishers, or is there anything going into your head like, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they trying this kind of thing?
I think there's only going to be a certain number of like New York Times and different stuff like that. I don't think that those necessarily can scale in terms of like reaching the local audiences, but that isn't to say there's not a model there. I don't know. I mean, I would say I do think you're starting to see the New York Times and some of these, bigger publications starting to go vertical, because what they're finding is that vertical helps you kind of create that habit. Now, whether it's everything from like the New York Times crossword puzzle to like the fashion section, where if you can really get somebody hooked in a specific section of that publication, it's going to be worth it for you to subscribe to the whole thing. And I think you're starting to see that. It was like, I read an article where I think the Dallas Morning News started to get a ton of subscribers from covering SMU football, which is, while it's a D1 school, it's not traditionally not a very good football team, but it's like by covering that one specific vertical that nobody else was, Dallas Morning News started to get a lot more subscriptions. So I think you're going to start to see, the bigger publications, more mainstream type, generalist publications starting to really focus on specific verticals that help them convert paying subscribers. Because at the end of the day, I mean, if you look at just newspapers in general, it's like what used to pay for it before. It's like the classifieds, right? And so it's one of those where the more you start to really find out what people will pay for, I think it's going to help you kind of fund some of the more important, general news items that, we all want and, need in society today.
Yeah, I'm actually coincidentally writing an article about this that should be coming out in the next few days, but like basically, making the argument that publishers should go more niche. And I use the examples like The Athletic, and I don't know if you've heard of this company called Technically Media, which basically launched a bunch of local tech verticals. And you actually, like you mentioned, the Dallas Morning News. So like there are a lot of newspapers that are starting to copy The Athletic, where they're launching individual sports verticals that you can subscribe to individually that are like slightly cheaper than the newspaper at large. So you are seeing like more general publications starting to think about, are there any kind of like niche spinoff things we can do?
Right, because I think it's one of those where you really need to think about where you can add value, right? At the end of the day, it's like if you have specific knowledge in respective verticals, it's like you should use that knowledge to acquire new subscribers. I mean, no disrespect to The Athletic, which I am a subscriber of. It's like I still think that it's super cheap, and it's like I'm a diehard Manchester United fan, and like I don't really get that much value from The Athletic in terms of like Manchester United, but I have a hard time understanding how, I don't remember what I pay for it, but like how that really scales where you can make like a really big business off of it. So I think it's going to be interesting. It's like you and I both know it's very expensive to create good content. And so some of these cheaper subscriptions, I just don't see how it's going to work if you're covering just like sports in general, where you've got Bleacher Report that in my opinion does a really good job and it's free. There's all these different, competitors, but I agree. I mean, paid strategy should be I think a strategy of any publisher, but I definitely question some of these new entities.
Yeah. So you guys are completely bootstrapped, right? Or at least mostly bootstrapped?
Yep. Just funded off revenue.
Do you think that VC money can put media companies at a disadvantage?
Do I think it can put?
Because you kind of hinted about that. You started talking about how Axios, has a great vertical strategy, but they've taken in all this money, so that kind of puts them at a risk. Like, and I've heard other, critiques of companies like BuzzFeed, like if they had like a slower growth model, they wouldn't have like run into trouble, but because they're creating all these expectations of like this unrealistic growth, that it's actually like sending them in terrible directions.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm actually pretty bullish on Axios in general with their VC strategy. I think it's a great one. They use the money wisely. It's not meant to get huge. It's meant to get huge, and just overall, it's meant to get huge in their respective verticals. And I think they're spending it. They seem to be at least spending it in a very intelligent, smart way. But as far as VC money in media, I mean, I think it's like anything else. It's like if you use it wisely, I think it can work. But as someone that's never raised any VC money, I don't know that I'm the right person to say whether it's a good thing or not. So,
Okay, John. Well, those were all the questions I had. Where can people find you online?
agingmedia.com.
Awesome. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
All right, man. Appreciate it.
Okay, that's all we have for you today. Be sure to subscribe to the Business of Content on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. See you next week.